were rehearsing my three-penny opera in Paris, and I'd noticed from the very start the young actor playing Filch, that impoverished shrimp who was so eager to become a qualified professional beggar. Quicker than most of the others, he seemed to understand the right way of rehearsing. He was cagey, he listened to the lines, and he was preparing certain human traits the author himself had observed in human beings. And so I wasn't surprised to find him one morning at the costume maker's. He appeared quite uninvited and explained politely that he would like to choose a hat for his character. I was helping one of the leading ladies to get her costume together, but even so, I managed to keep an eye on young Filch in search of a hat. He put the staff to work at once, and soon there he was in front of a huge pile of headgear. After an hour or so, he picked 2 hats out of the pile and got down to the business of making his final choice, which took him another hour. I'll never forget the look of torment on his famished and most expressive little face. He simply couldn't make up his mind. Out came the 2 hats. Hesitating, he picked up one of the hats and stared at it, with the air of a man who had just invested the last of his lifelong savings in some highly doubtful venture. Again, he hesitated. He took off the hat. He put it down, but he hadn't rejected it. Not yet, by any means. Naturally, the hat was not perfect, but perhaps it was the best of all possible hats. On the other hand, if it was the best available hat, it was certainly not the perfect choice. He reached for the second hat, but his eyes were still on the first. The second hat had certain advantages. Unfortunately, these were not in the same area as the disadvantages of the first, which made the choice particularly difficult. There were nuances at stake, degrees of shabbiness quite invisible to the casual eye. For instance, the first hat might have been expensive when it was new, yet now it looked more miserable than the second hat, which might have been cheaper when it was new. Filch had seen better days. Now he was down at heels. Was this hat expensive when he bought it originally? How expensive? More or less expensive than these hats here. How shabby should it be, anyway? Was Filch careful with his hat during his decline? Could he afford to be careful? And wait a minute. Suppose he never wore this hat in the good old days. How long ago were those good old days? And so, taking everything into consideration, what would the right hat look like? I saw him closing his eyes. He looked asleep on his feet. Once again, he was thinking over, one after the other, the various steps of Filch's decline and fall. He opened his eyes. No inspiration, apparently. He put the hat on, mechanically, to give it a try, so to speak, in a purely empirical fashion. Then he glanced at the other hat lying on the counter. His hand moved. He grabbed it, and there he stood for a long time, one hat on his head, the other in his hand, an artist torn by doubt, digging desperately into his past experiences, tortured by that almost never quenchable thirst to find the unique way, the one right way of playing a character. A character that has only 4 minutes on stage, 4 minutes to present all the attributes, all the fortunes, the misfortunes, a piece of life. When I looked again, he put the hats down, turned briskly about on his wheels, and walked to the window, where he stared out into the street absent-mindedly. After a time, he threw a lazy, almost bored glance at the 2 hats, inspecting them from a distance, coldly, as though he were quite uninterested. He took a last look through the window and shuffled back to the hats. He picked one of them up and threw it on the counter to have it wrapped. The next rehearsal day, he showed up with an old toothbrush which peeped out of his breast pocket to reveal the fact that Filch, although he might be sleeping under some dark hole under a bridge somewhere, would not give up the essential props of civilization. That toothbrush proved to me that this young actor, though he had found the best of all possible hats, was not at all satisfied with his choice. Ah, I said to myself, here is an actor in the age of science. And I was delighted.